thank you so much for the invitation to come here. I'm here for the book fair, doing different talks and seminars on the Blank Spot project, on freedom of speech and the situation in Eritrea and so on. But I'm really happy for this opportunity to also talk with you about the project. I mean, since you are really, a high-level audience with a kind of nerd interest in both business model and foreign reporting, I don't see this as a lecture. I mean, I would rather see it as a Q&A. So just, throw your hardballs and questions and thoughts immediately on me while I'm doing kind of just a background talk of how the idea to Blank Spot came up and where we are today in the project. But please just interrupt at any time. But as you all know, I think the idea of Blank Spot project was actually an idea that was born in prison. And the day that I left prison after 14 months, the last thing our fellow inmates, local journalists, other prisoners of conscience, what they said to us during those last seconds when we were on our way out, they shouted in our ear and said, "Please, please tell the world what you have seen." And that promise to those colleagues who woke up this morning in captivity just for doing their job as a journalist, that promise has got me back up in the saddle to go out and do reporting, and it also made me to write this book and to keep on working as a foreign journalist. But the thing is that when I got out of prison, I got out to kind of a new media climate, and suddenly when I started to contact the old editors-in-chief and pitching stories to them, they said, "Well, Martin, we don't have the budgets that we used to have. There's a crisis in journalism now. The paper is burning. I don't know even if I will have a job after the next quarter," and so on. And I was like, "Whoa, what happened while I was in jail? What happened with this business?" On the other hand, I could travel from Lund in the south to Luleå in the north, and there were this, filled aulas with young and old people wanting to hear my story from Ethiopia, wanting to kind of, there was a huge interest in journalism, and what journalism should all be about. Going to places, finding out who's lying, who's telling the truth, getting the facts, not just doing this on one hand, on the other hand, in the end time we'll tell stories, but to really check facts and go to places where the readers can't go themselves. There was a huge interest in this kind of journalism, where you use your feet and not just Google. So, in my head, I couldn't really make this up. How can this be a crisis for journalism? Is it really a crisis for journalism? And I kind of ended up in, no, it's not a crisis for journalism. This must be a crisis for old business models. This is a crisis for old media companies with CEOs with 10,000 euro a month salaries. This is not a crisis for me as a foreign reporter. It's not a crisis for interest in long form stories or in storytelling or in the purpose of journalism. So that idea started to grow. Can you do this in a different way? Now that I'm back in the saddle, should I just keep doing it the same way, selling my stuff to editors who can't really pay me, or should we try and turn this thing upside down to start to do journalism without middle hands and work directly towards the readers, the listeners, and the viewers? That idea started to grow. But at the same time, after my release, there was also another development when it came to foreign reporting, and that was that there was kind of an all-out hunting season on journalists declared. And me and Johan, we were the first one who were convicted as terrorists for doing our jobs. But the years that followed, we saw the same kind of procedure. We saw it in Egypt with Peter Gresti, Bar Mohammed and Mohammed Fahmy. We saw it in Turkey, we saw it in Iran, we saw it in country after country used terrorist laws or different kind of national security laws to criminalize journalism and criminalize dissent. And suddenly the whole the rules of the game had changed in a way. Because even when I started, working as as a foreign reporter 10 years ago, and I mean I did a lot of stories from forgotten conflict and visited guerrilla movements in Mindanao in the Philippines with the MPA, or in Nepal with the PLA, or in India with the Naxalites. I mean those guerrilla movements, they really wanted the journalists to come there so they could tell their story. And the government also wanted to give their point of view so they could tell their story. I mean, in the beginning when I worked, I felt that I was respected. I had my journalist ID, and I had kind of all parts kind of respected me, and that the necessity for a journalist to be there. But then suddenly, with the digital development and everything, now today's guerrilla movements and terrorist groups, they have their own YouTube channel. I mean, ISIS have 50,000 Twitter accounts. All the states have their own real developed state propaganda, machinery, TV, radio, you name it. So suddenly every kind of neutral observer, every objective journalist is a threat to all actors in every conflict. And that situation is also new, and that development, it came very, very quickly. And I don't really think that we grasped it until it was too late, until we had a lot of journalists in jail. And half of the journalists in jail now are jailed because of so-called terrorist crimes. So this development was also new, and that made you think that, well, we need to do this. I mean, we can't stop reporting. Then the world will go silent, and it's not an option. But we need to do it in a new, smarter way. We need to do it. We need to rethink the way we work. And maybe the days where a foreign reporter would come with a parachute and just go down and tell us that maybe those days are gone. We have to do it in a smarter way. We have to work with local journalists. We have to work in teams. We have to think of security in new ways. There was a lot of thoughts also on this, getting back in the saddle. But the third force that really made us start Blank Spot Project, it was the cats. And because you had this, when you presented this idea in Sweden that, well, I have this idea for a platform where people will pay for deep investigative foreign reporting, people would just laugh and said, no, all people want on the net is cats. Cute cats. There's no one who's prepared to pay for quality journalism. And I think that, well, I think we need the cats, and I mean, I like cats myself. I'm not a cat hater in any way, but I felt let's launch a war against the cats. Let's see if we can, show other media companies, but also show the public that people want cats and investigative foreign reporting and are prepared to pay for it. So we launched, it's been 1.5 years, the Blank Spot Project, and it was just an idea and a name. And our goal was to collect 1 million Swedish crowns within 3 weeks. And we started with like an 8-hour-long web TV show. We just put up a web TV camera and a sofa, and we presented our idea and said we want to do this kind of reporting. If you want to solve the crisis for journalism, come join us. And the reaction was, it was really amazing to see all the love that we experienced, and everyone was so happy that someone just did something apart from complaining. Because there was so much of complaining and so many colleagues who had kind of given up on this profession. And also, young people like yourself studying to journalists, you went, home to kind of a dinner party with your folks, and they would kind of laugh at your decision to become a journalist. You are studying to something that will lead to years of unemployment, and I think we, in a way, we inspired the business in many ways just by launching the project, and just stop complaining and trying to see light in the tunnel and a way to go. If you're interested in crowdfunding and how to set up your own crowdfunding campaign, we have written extensively about it, mostly in Swedish, unfortunately, but we share all our insights and so on. But we went just from an idea to 1 million Swedish crowns in 3 weeks. And in the beginning I thought that this was about collecting money, but it was not. It was about collecting ideas and creating really a movement for journalism. Because there were so many supporters that stepped up, both famous people like Lisa Marklund, the famous Swedish author, who came in and joined the campaign, but also, this is nurses at one of the big hospitals in Stockholm. They had a bake-off for journalism. So they sold like bread to patients patients and doctors and nurses at this hospital in Stockholm. So it was really one important thing during the campaign to highlight the supporters and these kind of local initiatives that occurred. But yeah, after week 1 million crowns, and in the end we had 3,027 people who backed us, and we could show that this wasn't a crisis for journalism, it was a crisis for all business models. And yeah, as I said, we also highlighted kind of the role of journalism and stuff. And the thing we felt, that was just step one. Okay, you have the money, now you have to also deliver kind of the journalist and the content. And we told everybody that in September we will deliver 2 stories and a site. And both professional and private, you should always kind of promise less than what you plan to deliver. So we had a plan for more stories, but we said 2 and a site. But we also had this idea to keep the engagement and to keep the people donating money, not just seeing them as passive readers, but also to get them active in the process when we were about to do these stories. So instead of seeing the role as a journalist just as a content producer, we saw it more of a discussion leader. So we created closed Facebook groups for every story that we planned. And then we started the story, day 1. Okay, we are going to Peru. We are investigating the mine in Peru. And then all the subscribers or members, as we call them, who were interested in Peru, they joined this group. And you had some of them who knew Spanish, some of them had relatives who lived in the city, and there was, I think it's one of the greatest untapped resources in reporting, really the knowledge among readers, and to get down from your ivory tower and thinking that I know less than my readers. I might have the questions and I have the tools and I have the methodology, but there is so much knowledge among the readers and listeners, the viewers, and to do my reporting really top notch, I need that experience. So we worked in closed Facebook groups for all our stories, and that is something I would really advise you to do. Because it's in the beginning it's very uncomfortable, because you are used to kind of keeping everything secret, sitting on your chamber, writing in secrecy, and then after a month or even years you publish something and then you hope for it to fly. What this created, because we had, like in the Peru group, there was about 500-600 members who were there with the journalist when he did the interviews in Peru, and he gave them live updates on how the story was developing. What happened when the story was published is that all these 500 people, they felt like ambassadors, because they had created this story together with the journalists. So they spread it on Facebook and became ambassadors for the story and also for journalism. And afterwards he got a lot of tips and for things to continue to develop together with them. So I really think that the new role of a journalist, and it also goes for investigative stories, is to work collaborative ways with the readers and to find different ways to engage them in the way you work. And I think that when you talk about Blank Spot, and also in Sweden we are famous for crowdfunding 1 million Swedish crowns. And of course, well, that was a good thing to do, but the really unique thing, I'd say, working with Blank Spot is how we worked with developing the relationship between the journalist and the readers, by taking readers seriously and not having this kind of attitude towards readers which you have on many of the big magazine, that readers are someone who would call you too early and correct spelling errors in your article, or it's just something annoying that you don't really see the potential in it, to kind of rethink that relationship. But just in short, we did a lot of stories during the year. We did a story from gold mines in Peru, and could reveal how the Swedish company Securitas were beating protesters at this mining site, and we focused on Maxime Schibbye, which is the woman on the picture here, how she has been harassed by the Swedish company Securitas. and gave her a voice, and that was a story that was, I mean, unknown in Sweden before. We see all these guards from Securitas, but we don't really know that it's one of the world's largest security companies, and the kind of business they do. We try to stay, I mean, loyal to our name, Blank Spot, and try to go to places when the other journalists had left. So, for example, we didn't go to, this is Bujumbura, the capital of Burundi. We didn't send a team there in April, May, when all the other journalists were there. We went there in December, 6 months later, when the cameras had, I mean, moved on to a new conflict. And I see that as our strength, to either be too late to a story or be there before there is a story. And in this way, I also think that we are trying to rethink news. I mean, if you look at, for example, if there is an earthquake in Kathmandu, you will have all the foreign media company coming there doing stories from the earthquake and I mean, taking kids out of the rubble. But after 72 hours, which is the maximum time you can survive under a demolished house, the journalist teams, they kind of go back home. But that is where the real struggle starts for Nepal as a nation and for the people living there. And at that time, the journalists have left, and they will return a year later to do a 1 year later story. But they're on their own. But I also think that why weren't any reporters in Kathmandu a year before the earthquake? I mean, we know this is an earthquake-sensitive area. Why wasn't any politicians asked questions? How are you preparing for an earthquake? We knew that within the coming 50 years there would be an earthquake in Kathmandu or in Calcutta or towards the Bangladesh border in this region. Why didn't we do that kind of proactive journalism? Why are there no reporters in Mexico City now asking the mayor of Mexico City, how are you preparing for an earthquake? There will be a large earthquake in the surroundings of Mexico City. It might be, I mean, a humanitarian disaster. Why don't we think more of journalism as something that can be proactive to kind of prevent catastrophes, not just reporting catastrophes? We also did a lot of investigative stuff on JAS Gripen and how we sold that fighter jet to Thailand, and how the Swedish embassy in Thailand had kind of put lipstick on a pig to make this sale of JAS Gripen possible, and it was a story that also was very, I mean, well received. We also try to focus on, I mean, strong subjects and the people demanding change. So, for example, we did a story on the Dao Din group in northern Thailand, some of the few brave that are openly challenging the military junta and the regime by raising it's a protest inspired by Hunger Games. And I mean, Thailand is also a country that I mean, there are 500,000 Swedish people every year who go there for vacation, but a lot, even the station correspondents in Bangkok, they self-censor themselves that they don't write that much about the monarchy or the Thai king and those kind of sensitive topics. So there is a lack of understanding what kind of society is Thailand, especially after the coup. So we try to fill that hole and did a lot of stories on Thailand. In a way, I mean, doing stories on ISIS and Syria in the beginning felt like, no, this is not our cup of tea. This is being done by others. But then I met Joachim Medin, who is also a freelancing journalist, and he told me that he had been with Kurdish forces when they, I mean, attacked ISIS, and he had taken from dead ISIS fighters papers and notebooks and kind of what you in the intelligence community would call for trash int. I mean, just paper and writings. And we said, let's look at these papers. So we translated everything from Arabic to Swedish and did a story on ISIS. Instead of being macro, having the macro perspective, we did like the micro perspective. What's in their pockets? And we could see that there were really signs of a state building. There were recipes from the ISIS pharmacy. There were times for the ISIS kindergarten opening hours, the rules for being accepted to the university, what kind of social benefit you would get if you lost your husband as a martyr, and so on. So there were really signs of that they were really building a state, and it was not just this crazy lunatic movement, as it was described as. So by going micro, we felt that we gave another perspective to this conflict than just macro. We also experimented a lot with how to tell stories, and we did a 360 interactive story from northern Burma, where you could walk around and kind of, it was a non-linear way of storytelling. Instead of, I mean, starting at A and going to Z, you could start at G and go to A. And it was fun to do, and we got a lot of attention for it, but in hindsight, I think we also did a couple of mistakes getting lost in the technology when we did this story. Because everyone loved it, and everyone, I don't know if you have seen it, but everyone walked around in northern Burma looking to the sky, but everyone missed the story that there were, I mean, Swedish Volvo trucks being used by a heroin syndicate, and that was lost because nobody found that story. And I think that even how much new technology you use, I mean, you must never forget that there are some basic rules in storytelling, and you have to guide the readers or the viewer. This is important, and journalism is a lot about leaving things out, and suddenly we have this technology where you could just get everything in, and we got a bit too blinded by the beauty of that. So that's a lesson we learned. So when we did a 360 film from Eritrea, we chose another perspective where you couldn't go where you wanted to go. We kind of, it was scene after scene after scene, and a voiceover, and it was more actually well received. But it's all about, I mean, testing and learning, and it's also when it comes to like 360 and VR and everything, there are really no, everyone is experimenting, and it's part of the joy of journalism to do that, to experiment with these new ways of storytelling. And I mean, the latest story we did was from Transnistria, but before that I used my experience together with Johan in Ethiopia and applied for a visa to Eritrea, the neighboring country, and these two countries are in war. So one of the latest story I did was to be able to get a journalist visa to Eritrea, and then we published in 3 large parts stories from this closed secret African nation. So I mean, we are now in. Let's go to this. I mean, we are now in a phase where we done a lot of stories. our first year, I think we done 11 or 12, and the really difficult thing for every crowd-funded medium is to survive your second birthday. I mean, you had all this enthusiasm year 1, but how do you take that to year 2? How do we re-engage all these 3,000 members? How do we find new members? How do we find new investors to buy us some time and some space? So what we did was, for our 1-year anniversary, we did this broadsheet magazine. From being, I mean, 100% digital, we felt it would be a nice thing to send a link to this historical format by doing, I mean, really a broadsheet. First of all, it was difficult to find a printing press that could actually print a broadsheet paper because they all had kind of taken down the machinery needed for that. But we managed to find one outside Linköping. And so we collected, I mean, some of the stories from the first year and presented them in a broadsheet and sent it home to everyone who supported the campaign. And it helped us to reach year 2, because a majority of the readers were re-engaged and put in money even for our second year. So now we are in our second year. I mean, still experimenting, and we are still very, very small. We are 2 full-time employed. It's me and Nils Resare. So I mean, we are a micro project compared to the other media houses in Sweden. But I feel that we have found our niche by working together with the readers. And one thing that we also did this year was that we felt that this old division between foreign reporting and domestic reporting, that maybe that division was was outdated, because we had so many members telling us, you should come to the north of Sweden. The local paper has shut down. There is no one here checking the local politicians or the local companies, and what will happen with the democracy in our part of Sweden if there are no journalists there to check the power. And that made us think that maybe we should launch a Blank Spot Sweden correspondent to look into these blank spots also in Sweden. So that we just started that project and have a correspondent for Lisa Bjurvald, who is right now working on a theme which we call Pressfrihetens vita fläckar, kind of the blank spots of press freedom. And that is one thing that we will develop in our second year. We have also started to work with schools, and we will launch a project in this spring where teachers and classes will join a project that will go on in 3 African countries from January to December, where the teams will first visit the schools and kind of tell them the ideas they have for the story, and then just as the readers did, the whole classroom will follow the team on while they're doing their story and add their experience. And I mean, sitting in a school in Sweden and just Google Kenya, and then we are in Kenya with the class there, and we Google Kenya there, and you can see the differences in search results and many different ways. I'm really looking forward to that, to increase kind of the media literacy. So that will be a fun thing we will do. As I said, we are also developing blank spots in Sweden, and we will launch also a couple of blank spot master classes, everything from working with digital security to first aid to writing and how to do 360 video and stuff like that. So we will have our own kind of small school of journalism. and so those are our ideas. But our main challenge is to recruit more members. When it comes down to business, that's what we need, to have more members who becomes subscribers and who monthly donate money to the project. So that's our main challenge, and our goal is to become 10,000 paying members. Then we would sit a little more secure in the saddle, and the goal is to reach there in 3 years. So we will see. But I think I will stop there. Just a brief introduction, and take all your questions and ideas. Yeah, shoot.
How do you find the story?
Usually you don't. You get tips from people who wants either as whistleblowers or people who have knowledge about conflicts and places who would be interesting. So that's also one of the things. Being 3,000 people, there is a lot of greater chance that you will find good stories than if you are just alone, Googling and trying to find stories. So by being transparent on the stories we work on, so for example, we say we are working on Thailand now, do you have any ideas or tips for Thailand? Then we get a lot of tips from Thailand. And of course it's a balance, not being too specific, not revealing sources or putting anyone in danger, but you could still, even in investigative reporting, be transparent on a lot of things to get tips and ideas on where to go. Yes?
Is the idea to grow into a sort of bigger organisation, or stay like a close-knit team and stay small, so to speak?
I would love to grow, a little bit more. But I think it's important also not to grow, too fast, not to be like, okay, we have 50 reporters tomorrow. But our plan is, when we have the resources, we will launch, another correspondent for a specific theme. And that's also, one of the, when we kind of threw everything in the air that we did year one and thought, okay, what works, what doesn't work, we felt that we should stop just doing a story. Okay, we go to Peru and we do this mining story and that's it. Instead, we should focus on having correspondents working on a theme. So for example, Nils Resar now is working on looking at Swedish aid policy and Swedish arms sale. And then, that's the red thread. Then there can be many stories, there can be, some short film or some podcast or whatever that comes out of that. But that's, and people are interested in that red thread, they will join his closed Facebook groups, which is, I mean, subscriber exclusive thing. So, and I'm working on kind of stories from the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and that's my kind of niche now. And then we have Lisa Bjurvald working on blind spots in Sweden. But I hope to, for example, launch I mean, correspondent looking at climate change, or at we could have a peace correspondent or something instead of a war correspondent, you know, looking at how do you create peace, go to Colombia, find different, you know, try to find some kind of theme that you could work on in different countries. So that's the idea, or a food correspondent, or, I mean, find different subjects and then get people prepared to pay for a correspondent working on those subjects, and then launch them. So that's the plan. Yes.
So in the beginning you said that you were tired of this old big business companies journalism, but finally you also had to become like a company to
Yeah.
still do journalism.
Yeah.
So is it, of course it's necessary the money, but at which point you will not gonna be also at the end that also kind of big company, which is the difference in your journalism?
No, really, and one of the unique thing is that on every story we have like costs for Blind Spot 1, that was the Peru story. So I mean, so we are transparent not only with how we work, but also what did the flight tickets, what were the cost for salaries and translation, what was the cost for housing, and that, I mean, then people will know, okay, I donated 100 crowns to Blind Spot, how did they use that money? Well, we could show them it went directly to journalism without middle hands. It didn't go to, I mean, a large stone building that needs heating during the winter. It didn't go to this CEO's salary. And so that's, I mean, that's one thing, being genuine. But of course, I mean, during this trip, you've gone from just being a kind of reporter to being some kind of entrepreneur way. I mean, that's been a journey to learn all of everything from, you know, taxes to equity campaigns and stocks. I mean, but it's been great fun also, and it's something that, I mean, enables journalism in the long run, building the company. So yeah, we might have been a bit, I mean, simplified things in the beginning when we started Blind Spot. Of course, we need to build a strong company as well, but we need also to use our money wisely, and I think that the subscribers will I mean, keep us accountable if we don't do that. Yes.
Yeah, Martin.
Yeah.
It's a nice idea with this model when the reader is following you, supporting you, and the bakers are involved.
Yeah.
They're tracking you and stuff like that. But in the end, we're not talking about, you know, Kickstarter campaign, right? We're not talking about the movie, or
No.
in the end about I don't know, cats. We're talking about investigative journalism. So how you approach the risks, the security risks? Because let's imagine you announce that you make a story about Russia tomorrow, and one of your bakers becoming like a guy from KGB, right? And he's like creating a Facebook account like Dan Lester.
Yeah.
How do you approach this? It's kind of risky, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and we anticipated that. For example, when we did the Peru story, we knew, of course, someone from Securitas would join Blind Spot to enter this group. Of course, they would do that, and that's why you had to plan. You have to, as well as you plan the storytelling for the story, you also have to plan the storytelling for how the story is built. So in the beginning, we didn't tell them that we were investigating Securitas. We just told them that we are going to Peru. And then as soon as we had kind of, I mean, we were ahead of the readers. So as soon as we had secured evidence that Securitas had done this and that to Maxime Chapa and others, then we could say that we are investigating the gold mine. And then we secured even more evidence. And then finally in the end, when the reporter was back in Sweden, he said that, well, the company I had been investigating is Securitas. So of course you had to choose at what time to share what information. I mean, I went to Eritrea and we had a group from Eritrea, but the people in the group, they didn't know in which country I was. I mean, I kept on reporting about general things about how the story developed, but I didn't tell them I was in Eritrea until I had returned back home. Of course, there are pros and cons with this method, and of course there are, I mean, highly sensitive projects which we also have that doesn't have a Facebook group and that doesn't have this kind of working with the audience element to it. But there's also, I mean, I also think it's difficult in these days to go somewhere and try to hide, and in a way it can, I mean, if you talk to agents or people working in the Secret Service, what really makes those kind of people nervous or like repressive states and the Secret Service, if it's someone comes there and tries to be sneaky. He's a journalist, but he's pretending to be a tourist, and he meets these opposition groups, and then he goes to the museum. I mean, such a guy they would, I mean, be really close to, because he would trigger all their fears and anxiety. But someone coming there putting up a red, toppluva hat which says I'm a journalist, and I'm here to do stories in this country. I mean, that could also make you secure in a way, because they would know that, well, you're not trying to hide, you're not acting suspiciously. So I mean, it's depending on, of course, what country it is and the story of the country and what state they're in. But I think sometimes we try and be, I mean, too secret, and we don't really know how to do that. And people who work with being secret and who are trained agents, when they see someone trying, that will trigger, all the alarms will go off, because they will have someone acting like some kind of an agent. So I think it's a mistake. And even, I mean, I might swear in the church now, but even, using encryption and stuff, it's great, but it's also a way of triggering a country's alarm to send encrypted emails or something, because they would see something encrypted is going out of this person's computer. Maybe better to just have a blank computer and not send any mails with anything, sensitive while you're in the country. So sometimes trying to protect yourself and trying to be safe might put you on the spotlight in a new way. But it's a balance. It's a balance, of course.
But a small continuation to this question.
Yeah.
Did you miss like a big exclusive interview or big stuff you're intending to get from that country only because you've been too open?
Yeah, really good question. So what you have to do when you have this working method is that the first thing you do, before you post anything on Facebook or anything, you go to the CEO of Securitas and you do the ansvarsintervju, what you call it, the interview with the responsible person. I mean, usually that's the last thing you do, but now you have to do it the first thing you do, because that is the only interview you will ever get, from our experience. You need to do that the very first thing, and you need them to say that, no, we don't have any problems in Peru, and then you can hold them accountable to that statement. But no, it's a very good thing, because as long as you reveal that you are investigating them, you will have real problems getting an interview along the way. But there are also ways for that. I mean, I saw there's a German, was a journalist project. There was some politician then, and he refused to answer the questions, so they went outside the politician's house with a projector, and they kind of showed the questions on the wall of his house. These are the questions you should answer. So I mean, we could have done that with Securitas in a way, by rethinking how to do this last interview if you don't get them to come in front of your microphone. Yes.
Yes. So of course, the audience for you is the most important thing. But what about the stories or the countries that looks that they are not so interesting for people, but you feel that they are relevant? Will you go further or not?
I think it's
because somehow you could
Yeah.
become like a slave of public interest.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. I mean, and we said from the beginning that even though we are a crowd-funded project, and even though you can contribute with your ideas, we still have the editorial integrity. I mean, I still call the shots as an editor-in-chief, even though you have 3,000 people screaming, go to, you know, this place, do this. No, if I don't feel that it's, I mean, relevant from a journalistic point of view, no, we will not go there. But of course, also being a small company, we need also other media houses to kind of pick up our stories and to, I mean, to do rewrites and stuff. It's important for the survival of the project. So that it's a balance. I mean, I felt that Thailand was such a topic where we felt that, okay, there are many people wanting us to do stuff in Thailand, but it's also interesting. There are also a lot of stuff not being done in Thailand, so we would go along with this. I mean, for example, but you can also create an interest. Like our most read piece now on the site, it's a story from Transnistria. It's a small place between Moldova and Ukraine. I actually kind of never heard of it before Niels said he was going to Transnistria to investigate it, a thing. And it's our most read piece, and we had a meetup 2 days ago at our office. We also invite all our readers after the story is published to come and discuss the story and to take it further, and we invite the stakeholders in the story to give their point of view when everything is live streamed and so on. And it was, I mean, it was our most, it was a record in people attending that meetup. So by working, you know, and he'd been working on Transnistria for 2 months, he had created an interest that wasn't there from the beginning, but it was created along the way. And you could see other magazines also picking up Transnistria. So you can also, set the agenda in a way. But I mean, of course, you notice if we write about ISIS, we see that those things, they go as a rocket on the site. So of course, there is a huge interest in getting information and facts on ISIS. So even though other people are covering them, we felt, okay, we can do it if we have our own angle to it, not just to write a rewrite or something that doesn't really contribute with something new, but having something that you can see on Google Analytics that works very, very well. I mean, it shouldn't just make it to avoid it, but instead of, okay, how can we do this, but do it in our way.
Do you have any other income sources than the donations from the readers?
Yeah, happily we have one Swedish billionaire who said that he would give us 250,000 crowns yearly over a period of years, called Sven Hagströmer. And I feel that's great. You have that situation in the States and in UK where rich people donate money to journalism. In Sweden, traditionally rich people, they donate to the Red Cross or to NGOs, but I think there is an insight among many of them that if you want to fight corruption, if you want to create development and democracy around the world, there's no, supporting local journalists is one of the most important things that you can do. And I think there's such a shift in attitude that more and more mecenater and other people will donate to journalistic projects. So yeah, he donated, and then we managed this summer to find 2 more, and of course we are working on getting larger investors to buy us time to reach these 10,000 subscribers. Once we are there, we can rely solely on them, but it's not the situation yet. And then of course, are we then bought by these powerful politicians? And I asked him, okay, what you give us $250,000 now yearly? What do you want for that? Do you want stocks? Do you want? What's your take on this? And his response was, I want you to investigate people like me. And so that seemed like a pretty fair transaction. So of course, if we would find stuff in his bank or in his business, we wouldn't dare to. We would dare to investigate.
Did you investigate, for
Yeah.
example, that billionaire that you said?
Sorry.
That billionaire that you
Yeah,
said?
yeah.
I know the person is a bit strange, but how do you know for sure that his money is fair? It's not like do you investigate him before he donates it, or because it's
Yeah, of course we check him up, and we have meetings with him and check what stocks does he owe, what kind of companies is he active in, of course. And of course there are people who we wouldn't accept large chunks of money from. But I'd say as a trend, I think it's positive that that journalists receive money from these kind of people, and not only traditional NGOs working with health issues and other issues. And it has to do with I think we are more and more kind of appreciating the role that journalism plays both in Sweden and internationally. And so I see it as something very positive, and I hope to find more people who invest in Blankspot. But of course the whole idea with the business model is to have thousands of subscribers. That would be our base, and then if we get a large chunk of money from someone, then we could develop something new and make a new app, or do something that we wouldn't afford otherwise. But yeah, it's of course it can be a dilemma in a way. Of course, it's not black and white.
Strikes me as very sort of similar to fundraising in any not-for-profit organization. Do you kind of learn as you go, or do you take after other organizations?
We learn as we go, because every country is kind of unique. But of course we met with for example, there are the Guardian, they have a division that's funded by aid money or something. It's called, I don't know, they have a specific name for it, and they do like foreign stories, and it's not founded really by the subscribers but by others. So we had meetings with them and tried to understand how do you keep your integrity, and what are your thoughts on who do you accept money from and not, and how do you vet your investors and so on. So we learn as we go, but we also try and take advice. But the main challenge is to go from crowdfunding and having this 1 million crowns and then just spending them on journalism, to finding this kind of sustainable business model where people would donate monthly. Because it's one thing to donate like 10 crowns once, but to do it every month, it's another kind of commitment, and that is a challenge. Now to create that kind of. So crowdfunding is great to get something to start with, and to kind of makes it possible for you then to show your idea and what you want to do. But in the long run, to rely solely on crowdfunding would be too exhausting to every year have this large campaign, and it wouldn't be as sustainable in the long run. Yes.
Do you have any project on Afghanistan? Because before, when you were talking about that, go to the places where other journalists have left, Afghanistan is one of such an example, because when the foreign troops were in the country, there were so much reporting everywhere about Afghanistan. But now the conflict has escalated, but we don't hear about it. So when Afghans flee the country, people are asking why are they fleeing? Because they don't see that the conflicts are going on.
Yeah, exactly. We have one Afghanistan idea in the pipeline, but it's one of those stories that is not mature yet for a Facebook group or for. But there is one specific angle to it that we are looking into. Yes. So, but what we're also trying to do is building a network with journalists who know Afghanistan, and Sweden is blessed in a way that we have migrants from all the conflicts in the world in Sweden, and it's also a huge untapped resource to kind of. And we could see that when we wrote about Burundi, we got a lot of exiled Burundians who joined Blankspot, and we wrote about Eritrea, we got a lot of Eritreans who joined Blankspot and joined this group. So it's also really a key. Before we launched the story to Afghanistan, to also make sure that we have people on the project with knowledge of the country and with the contacts and so on.
Here we got a question from the live feed.
Yeah.
Do you think that Blankspot could spread to other countries, not like the idea, but the actual company, Blankspot?
There is a network now with crowd-funded sites in Europe. We have, like a Facebook group with editor-in-chiefs where we are sharing ideas. I mean, how do you survive year 2? How do you walk the shadow of death and come out?
Yeah.
How do you re-engage members, and a lot of talk like that. I mean, I'd love to franchise the idea. So if anyone is interested, I would give them all the tools and experience that we have to launch. But I also think that every country is unique in a way and has its own media situation, and it's very difficult to take one concept from one country to another. After we started, we discovered, for example, the correspondent in the Netherlands, and which also have kind of the world record in crowdfunding. We have the Nordic record, but they have the world record, and it was really, inspiring to see how they moved on. And but they described also that from a Dutch perspective, their most read correspondent was a person working on finding utopian societies, traveling to different. And that worked within a Dutch context. I'm not sure that in Sweden that would be such a huge interest in someone looking for utopia. So of course there are differences, but there is a lot to learn. But I think the main lesson is, don't think too much and don't complain too much. Just go ahead and do it. Just like you're doing now. There's a live feed, and people. Just you have to experiment and try, because the interest is there really among readers, listeners, and viewers. They want journalism, and I think that we are, entering a golden years for journalism ahead as soon as this business model thing has been sorted out. So I think they can. It's not about taking the blank spot concept, but be inspired that people are prepared to pay for quality journalism, and it is the tools and the knowledge of a journalist are more important than ever, and the public wants that and needs that, not to be too depressed about the general situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel that fundraising sort of gets in the way of the journalism, or is it a good way to sort of get to know your audience? And
if you see fundraising as just collecting money, yes, then you shouldn't do it. Because if it's just the money you want, then there are better ways to get money. You could borrow them from a bank, or have one person who would invest 1 million in you. But if you're looking for future readers, and if you're looking to build really a movement for journalism, then fundraising is a great way to start. But you have to be, genuine about this relationship that you want with the readers. They have to feel that it's something more than they just give you money. That you have to really involve them in your work as a journalist. Explain to them what you're doing. Explain to them, okay, now we're on this phase. Now we're in the research phase. Now we will, go and interview this person, and just have trust that they will have ideas for questions and for angles and for stories that you yourself couldn't think of. They have to feel that it's for real. Then crowdfunding or.
So what do you use to engage people? Like, do you go out and ask for tips, or do you show like behind the scenes, or how do you sort of?
The whole.
engage people?
I could show you how it looks. We have the closed Facebook groups are. It's behind the scenes material. So it's everything from, what I pack in my bag, to how I prepare for a trip, how many socks do I bring. That people are interested in both small and big things. How do I plan the interviews ahead and stuff like that. So that's something you get being a paying member. You get access to that. We're also we are developing now an app that members will have, because it will also be something that we could send push notifications and keep them closer to us. Because the challenge is being a digital site, how do you get into people's lives? Before, when you were a magazine, you came in the morning, bam, on the doormat, you were there. People would pick you up and put you on the breakfast table. How do you get there as a digital site? And I think but also by using Facebook, we could see that once our team, like now we landed in Peru, then everyone would wake up in the morning and they would have this notification from the group Blindspot 1, and they would see, oh, this reporter has now. So by using Facebook and the infrastructure that most of us have in our phones already, we kind of achieved that a little bit, and creating this contact with the readers. It's also about asking people what do you want from being a subscriber or to Blindspot, and some people they don't want to get involved at all. They get afraid. Well, why do you call me a member? I don't want to come and make coffee or be the cashier, or sometimes those kind of words can also scare people away. I just want to pay, and some people they just pay and say I don't even read your stories, but I think they need to be done. And some are really enthusiastic, over the hill, supportive in all sorts of ways. So there are also different kinds of members that joins the project. So it's about finding, I guess, different arenas for them to feel that they are getting something unique from it. Yes.
What will you do if the membership continues to grow and you do your after-story chat and get-together? I really think this is amazing, so I believe it will grow personally, but what will you do then? How will you solve that problem?
If it grows like larger than life, I guess just get bigger venues for the meetups. Still, most people watch them. When we had the Transnistria meetup, for example, 2 days before, you had like 1,000 people watching it. Online, the Facebook live, and then we had, I guess, 80 or something who were there at the venue. So of course, by having a live feed, it makes it accessible for more people. I also think that everyone is not interested in the same kind of topics. We have a lot of people now who join for the Blindspot Sweden stories. They don't care about foreign reporting. They don't care about a lot of stuff, but they are really worried that there's no reporter in Jämtland where they are from. So they would join that group. So being, more and more niche, and then finding. For example, we have ideas to have like a correspondent working on covering, interesting feminist movements in the Balkans, for example. It's quite geographically a niche subject, but not thematically. It would be a huge interest for it, and then all those people could join that group and follow that correspondent, and also enabling that correspondent to do their work by becoming a paying member. So I guess this old thing where you had everyone who read from the front page to the last page the same stories. It's not a problem if you would just have a lot of people just reading the front page or the last page in these different groups. At least that's how I see the growth scenario.
Will you say the Jumpman example where they started a group? It almost seems like citizen journalism. You've got a lot of people in the Facebook group that are interested in stories in their area.
Yeah.
You don't have journalists there, say, for instance, it might be 2 people. What will you do? How will you solve that issue?
I think the way then is to go there and to educate them. How do you, to educate them in becoming, good citizen journalists. Give them the tools. How do you check the kommunens diarier? How do you get out papers from the, creating this movement for journalism together with people living in this area, and saying that this is not, we have to fix this, just not complaining that the local paper is shut down or is just, to do something about it together. So of course we are thinking of going to these places, educate them, and giving them tools, and then working with them and then when they find the material and we have the stuff for a story, then in the best of worlds, and one of our reporters would go and do this story and present it. But if it's not us, maybe we give it to some other magazine nearby, or to collaborate in some way. That's an idea. But you can also see a lot of interesting projects like that, popping up in Sweden, in Facebook groups. But you also have a trend where there's a lot of hate groups and a lot of Facebook groups with the name of a city created by right-wing extremists, and they would just put in a lot of false news about immigrants and stuff like that, but then they become kind of a local paper in a way. That development is also a sign that we need more of media literacy also for kids growing up. Okay, what's the difference between a paper with ansvarig utgivare and everything that goes with that, with press ethics and everything, and just Facebook groups with rumors? What's the difference? Isn't text just text? So I think here's a huge need for some kind of media literacy campaign. Yes.
So when you go to countries and you do investigations and then you publish them on your website and things, apart from your stories reaching the members who might be from those countries, what can you tell us? What kind of impact do your stories have in the countries that they're about?
I mean, one of the things that we said from the beginning is that we have to write, don't just write about people, but write for people. I mean, if we're in whatever country we're in, everything is also translated to English and to German, and I mean, the Eritrea stories is now being translated to Tigrinya to get this, I mean, to have that effect and to create that impact. And of course, in the long run, the stories we do, we want them to make a difference for the people that we interview. I mean, they take huge risks and talk to me or my colleagues, and then we want something to happen. We want to change in their lives, and I mean, you could see it in of course creating and higher awareness of the JAS case that it was discussed in the Swedish Parliament, and I mean, you could see that the journalism we do, it has these kind of effects, but I think that we need to work a lot more on that, and also by establishing contacts with local papers. But one thing that we have worked with is, I mean, coming from the outside. Of course, you're there, you do your story, and then you fly back home. You don't live the story as the local journalists do. And I mean, as we know today, the most dangerous thing you can do is to be a local journalist writing about local politics. But what they can do then is that they can quote the story. Like I said, we have this Swedish reporter, he wrote this, quote, unquote. And that gives them kind of, expands a little bit their space to, because they don't have to report it themselves, but they can quote us. So in that way we can establish a relationship with local journalists and create an impact. But of course that's in the long run what we want to do to make a difference with the stories.
Well, I think we're nearly done. Just one final question.
If I can be very brief. You talk about the commercial newspapers maybe closing up, but what about SBT and the small local operations? Do you find you're competing now with them for stories, or are they becoming irrelevant in this?
In municipalities around Sweden, or?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say that the role of public service is becoming, tremendously important, because they are the only ones left in many places. And I mean, I hope that, we have a new media proposal coming now in October, and it's the role of public service for democracy and for journalism, it can't be kind of, it's becoming more and more important. So, and I don't see our role. Our role is to go where the blank spots are, to go where the silence is. Our role is not to fix the business as a general, or to become like a daily news platform. No, and I think it will be difficult also for the other media companies to do that, because there will always be a citizen there first with their cell phone or on Twitter or on Instagram or anything. So I don't think that you really can compete with news, but and I think you shouldn't try to be first, but try to be last, but try to be correct and to give something more than the news. That's how to survive and to get people to pay for your content.
Martin, thank you so much. I'd just like to ask, because I'm guessing that there are people in this room who would love to write for you at some point
Yeah.
in the future.
Yeah.
Do you take freelance pitches, or do you? I guess you must have a lot of interest from freelance journalists.
Yeah, I mean the thing is we don't take like, I mean, one story, just a story. I have a great source of inspiration for me. It's Paul Solopek. He's doing this 7-year-long story, walking from Ethiopia and Africa and Europe and Asia and North and South America. In 7 years, we'll finish in Peru. And he have this. He's going by foot, kind of slow journalism, but still tweeting and sending out pictures and texts and if someone had pitched me like, I want to do this year story, then I would say, oh, wow, this is a great thing. How do we finance this? How do we find someone to? Those kind of things would be more interesting, to think about something thematical that could go on for years and that could get a Facebook group with a couple of thousand people to join it. Those kinds of ideas we are looking for, but not just this general, there's elections in Colombia coming up, I want to go there and interview, she says, he says, and blah blah blah. It's not, one, we don't have the resources, and two, other people are doing those kind of things better. So just try to think larger than life stories.
That's a really good point on which to end, really, thinking larger than life. Martin, thanks ever so much for coming this afternoon at such short notice.
No problem.
Really wonderful to listen to you.
And just, if you haven't seen our Eritrea 360 story, just give you a glimpse of it. We will release this one in English soon, but now it's Swedish subtitles.
Har fått visa upp till det slutna landet. Så nu står vi här första morgonen på stadens paradgata framför den enorma katolska katedralen.
Doesn't work in Safari.
Se dig omkring. En bit bort ligger stridsvagnskyrkogården.
Yeah, so this is our
Minnen av det långa kriget för självständighet är ständigt närvarande. På platsen har man samlat.
This is a tank cemetery outside Asmara with just a lot of destroyed Ethiopian tanks.
Det ger en föraning om det materiella pris som man betalade för självständigheten. Men det säger inget om det mänskliga. Vi besökte platsen och intervjuade.
So this time when we did a 360 story, you couldn't choose where to go. You were it was me, Johan, and you were there like next to us. So the voiceover is like how it is to work as a journalist in Eritrea, with the pros and cons, and preparing for interviews or just. But we also did, like a 200,000 character long story. So but then we did a VR thing also, so it becomes like a trailer that creates interest for the long form piece. And it was also a lot about just experimenting and trying. And it works with like a VR headset even more.
Looks like a game, Counter-Strike.
Yeah. Maybe some just inspiration. If you say, talking about pitching stories, just if you say the word VR, all editors go bonanza, but no one knows really what to do with it. But it's really easy, you know. We just bought this camera and had it with us. It was no extra work or anything, and just select some scenes and then just a voiceover.
Oh no, that means we have to teach VR on the course.